Hello, and welcome to the Talk Roundtable, where the table is set and you are invited. Every time we come to this table, we get community stakeholders, people who really care about our community, and we have real conversations about crucial elements and crucial events. Then we go from those conversations to a collective consciousness about what we really are all going through from our respective perspectives. And then finally, we move to courses of action. So you can expect during this time that with the folks we have here, we're going to have some honest conversation. We're going to have some open and compassionate listening, and then we're going to move to courses of action so that we can learn how to be better together. So with that said, let's get started. I have a wonderful, wonderful group of people at the round table with me today. I'm so glad to have you all. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure to have you. And it took us a while to work out schedules because these are busy folks, but we're so glad that you've been gracious and generous with your time. So first we have here on my left, we have the Honorable Cheri Siler-Mack. She's a judge in the 12th Judicial District. She's an elected judge, a woman of the people. She's also a mother and a strong and positive part of our community here in Fayetteville as well. We have Johnny Wilson, the executive director of Fayetteville Urban Ministry. He's a transplant from Landrum, South Carolina. I would like to remind people, but a great guy. Used to be my boss when I worked at Urban Ministry. Also a father and a grandfather. And then we're going to jump demographics to Tony Veritas, a young filmmaker, videographer, producer in his own right. And he is the owner of Core Studio and also an FSU graduate, Bronco Pride. Yes, attitude check. And so we're glad to have you here with us today. And finally, we have Wade Fowler, who's a local civic leader, a business owner of Fowler's Southern Gourmet. I hear some of the best barbecue in town. So
I'll take that.
But Wade, whenever I'm out in the community trying to get things done and hear what the people are saying, I find that you often are there with an open ear and also ready to share. So we're glad to have you at the table as well.
Thanks for inviting me.
Well, with that said, we're at the round table and we're all invited and ready to communicate. So Judge Siler-Mack, I wanted to start with you, and I'll share this question with all of us. In light of all of the racially charged violence and experiences and emotions that we've had in this country and really across the world over the last month alone, what do you think we need to be talking about as a community?
Well, the biggest thing we need to talk about is we need to be open and honest about respecting people for who they are. Talk about things that are real. Discuss the elephant in the room. Race matters. And we're not comfortable with accepting the fact that race matters, because I think that some folks perceive that if I say that race does matter, does that mean I'm racist? And it doesn't. It means that you understand the issues of those that don't look like you, those that are not in the same socioeconomic status of you. But you understand that it does play a part. I can look at all of us here, and race matters to us, gender matters. So we need to be honest about the things that do matter, and let's move forward to see what can we do to make sure that that's not the only thing that does matter.
And one thing I've heard recently is someone said that we should get away from trying to be colorblind and become more color compassionate, right? Get to know each other in our differences and then come together so we can work together and be better than we were before.
And what I do, and that's a good point, but what I do is, like, if I told all of us before we came in here and looked at us and in the skin that we're in, if we all closed our eyes and couldn't see, I wouldn't know what you looked like. But I could tell from your heart, because my other senses would be heightened. I can tell by your body language. I could tell by the way you articulate things, the way you talk. And the color of your skin would never matter. It would never matter, because I would never know. I would be able to pick up other things just based on our conversation. So a lot of times we need to do that.
I would say that perspective is refreshing to hear from a judge. Because we always say, justice is supposed to be blind, but oftentimes it has not been in this country. So thank you for endeavoring to see people with your heart.
I do. You have to. And I see each person individually. And I think that's been the beauty of me being as a juvenile prosecutor and working in the juvenile area, which children are my passion, and they have been. The beauty of that has been that I get to tailor each individual's disposition, because we don't use the word punishment. I get to tailor what your needs are based on what you need. So Tony may not need the same thing as Wade, but they may be charged with the same thing. But Tony's needs are different. Your needs may be different from Wade and Tony's, but you all were in the same pot. But the beauty of what I get to do is I get to see what do you need so that you can be successful. What services did you need? Do you need mental health services? Do you need DSS involvement? He may not need that. He may need just someone to put him in a find a friend program, which I often call Johnny from the bench in a minute. I was like, Johnny? He's like, yes, Judge. So that's the beauty of also being able to have the different relationships that we have, that we can do that, because this is what I need for this child that's standing in front of me right now. Can you do that for me? And he never says no. Even if he can't do it, he makes it happen. So
well, we'll segue to Johnny with that, because like you said, it's the services that the person in front of you at that time needs, right? We can easily treat people as a demographic or as an identity politic or whatever the case may be, but when you treat each person as the individual in front of you and love them the best that you can, we found, I know in urban ministry, you found that you can serve them the best way possible. So Johnny, you've been serving for, wow, over 2 decades now,
Right.
the neighbors in need here in Cumberland County. What is it that we need to be talking about here in light of the latest conversation with regard to serving people and meeting them where they are?
It's it's very, very simple, no matter how complex we make this issue. And what it goes back to is just being thoughtful and respectful. No, there's not much education for that. You can read every book there is, you can study every class, but there's a saying that goes, you just can't pay for class. And, it's very, very simple. Just as Judge was saying, if we all closed our eyes and had to get pushed around and moved around the room, and you're supposed to hold hands with someone to be able to enter the room or exit the room, think about the just massive humanity and unity that comes with that. I'm fortunate. I've been blessed to have a very multicultural life. Judge has watched me grow up right before her eyes. And the beauty of that is just having someone like her who is a mentor to me and a big sister, just watching someone just grow up, because I had to steal things from her, watch what she did, how she treated other people, and so many others. As we often say, my mentors are, it's a collage. There was not one person along the way, there was many. And best believe many of them were Black, many of them were white, many of them were other. And so it's just kind of shaming Sonny or Dr. Kelly. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's very shaming that we are in 2020 and we're having to have these conversations, but it's also refreshing that there's no escape. These conversations need to happen now. We're not going to move on until tomorrow. These are the conversations that need to be had right now, today in 2020, because we're talking about America and everything that America stands for, talking about the freedom, talking about the pride, talking about the courage. Well, I challenge everyone, what about the love and respect?
Yeah, and we have a generation coming up that's not going to allow the silence to continue. They will make some noise. And Tony, I don't want you to speak for the whole generation, but I know you're the youngest person at this table. Help us to understand, in the wake of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and of course, most recently, George Floyd and so many others who have come before, how are you digesting it as a young man, as a young Black man, as a young professional and business owner? And as you digest it, what should we really be talking about at this table?
I think education is really important. When you educate somebody about what someone is dealing with, you have the ability to have compassion and empathy when you approach a subject. And I think that when you're not educated on how something affects someone else, and your focus is not as selfless as it could be, I think you can be blind to a lot of issues. And it seems counterintuitive to try to address an issue if you're not equipped. It's similar to looking at a map. You can get a general idea of what's taking place on the map, but if you don't have a key, you don't really know how to properly read that map.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I wanted to ask you, Wade, one thing I forgot to say, maybe your most important title is Daddy and Granddaddy as well. You are a leader in this community. I've known you since I've been here. I know you to be outspoken and also very dedicated to seeing this community grow and be strong. With all that we've seen around the nation, with the fissures and the shaking up because of the violence and also there's the tension and the emotions, what do you think we need to be talking about here?
Well, I think that we need to see if we can get beyond group identity. Honestly, I think the most important thing is to learn to know people individually. If you look at how we do it, we're all individuals here. I know everybody here at the table, except for Tony. This is the first time I've met him. But we're able to have a good conversation with one another because we know each other, and we don't necessarily, lump and say, oh, okay, there's the black folks over there, here's the white guy over here, and so we're all different. We need to find out that we have a whole lot more in common than we have in difference. And then we need to learn how to celebrate our differences and say, you know what can I appreciate out of what you do differently versus what I do? What can, there's lots of differences in our culture, and you can't expect cultures to always 100% get along. But you can celebrate different parts of culture that make a difference. But I think the key thing to understand, and this happened, you mentioned it, I got elected to city council just as a, quote, conservative white Republican on an issue of stopping what was seen as targeting of young black drivers for consent searches. Now, my purpose behind it was simply for freedom for everybody, but looking at the disparity there and taking the time to sit down and listen to pastors, we had a meeting, a separate meeting, it was there, and we had this meeting with them and hearing the stories. And that's what people need to do. They need to be willing to sit down and hear the stories. In other words, I need to hear, like I needed to hear from them the stories of what happened that caused this thing to occur and the perceptions around it and who was responsible and all that. By the same token, I've had experiences in my life that somebody really needs to listen to and say, well, this is what has colored my vision of how things need to be. And then we can learn and say, oh, okay, I get it. Now I understand why you're feeling the way you are. And this is done on an individual basis, and now, you know what? And now I get understanding how you feel like you do. And I think we really made a difference. I mean, we stuck our neck out on the line. It made a difference. And the other thing is, when we tend to categorize people as a group, we forget things. And I will tell you, a good friend of mine, Darswell Rogers, you guys all know Darswell. One day we were talking, I said, Darswell, I mean, really, I just don't see color. He said, stop. You can't help but see it. We got eyeballs. We can see. I can see that you're white, and you can see that I'm black. You can't. So the difference is, for you and me, that's not the big defining characteristic. So we have to be willing to acknowledge, yeah, God made us all in His image, but He's got a lot of different shades in His image. And seriously, I think people need to go to the Bible and understand that it is a giant love story, and that there are so many truths in there that if we would live by them, that we would get along so much better as a society.
I think there are two things that you see when you talk about the Bible. You see stories after story told, but like you said, it always comes back to love. So how do we tell stories and witness each other's stories with love? I think that's a big question that I've been trying to answer and come up with. So I wrote this show called The Talk, and I've been performing it in Durham and Chapel Hill and Tennessee, and I'm planning on going to Boston and all these other places, but I want to perform it here. We did it back at Fayetteville State University in January, had a very small audience, but I was hoping that more people would come so I could tell my story, and then afterward we'd have a discussion like this, and other people could tell their stories. Because what I found is that, facts are facts. We all understand that. People have a lot of strong opinions about facts, but facts can be alternated and fabricated and decimated and adjusted if you look from this angle, but the truth is the truth. And your truth is your truth, my truth is my truth. That's not to say that we all live in a world of relativism. It's to say that my perspective and how that thing happened to me in my body produces a truth, an understanding of truth to me that's just different from yours. Not better, not worse, not more truthful, right? Not more Veritas than yours, right? But it's my truth because it's what I lived. And I want to ask you, Judge, you deal with people every day, and it's amazing to me and I've seen you in the courtroom. I've seen you in the courtroom, I've seen you in the church, I've seen you in all kinds of places. You show a stern compassion for people. You love them so much that you give them clear consequences and chance after chance where needed. How do you hear their stories and help to change their stories with compassion and love?
Well, the first thing is, before I get on the bench, I make sure I quote Micah 6 and 8 every day, because that's what's required of me once I was elected by the people. I work for the people. And what do I have to do? What's required of me? I am to do justice, because that's what I've been elected. But I have to do justice with mercy, so that at the end of the day, I can walk humbly. And I remember having that a conversation with Judge A. Elizabeth Keeper, whose seat I took. And I was watching her on a case before I was to be elevated to the bench. And then she had a conversation with me. And there were 4 cases. And she asked me, how would I rule in each of those cases? And in 3 of those cases, I ruled exactly how she would. The last one I did not. And she asked me, why did I rule that way? I said, because the law says A, B, and C. She said, I understand, but you must do it with compassion. So every time you rule, you use the letter of the law, but you use the letter of the law with compassion. And that has stuck with me. So I know what the law says, but I can give you and I can issue my sentence and my ruling, but when I do it with love and when I do it with compassion and you really understand that I'm not against you, I'm for you, because I'll tell anyone who stands before me, but for grace and mercy, my favorite twins, there stand I. And they'll tell you, anybody that comes in my courtroom will tell you, I'll mention my favorite twins all the time, which are grace and mercy. And I tell them, grace and mercy gives me what I didn't earn and what I didn't deserve. But nevertheless, every day I get it. I get a new dose of it. So when I see people, and one of the things we have to do is we've got to learn as a society is that I've got to meet you where you are. So if I meet you where you are, then we can build from there. And the other thing that we have to understand is what I cannot do is I can't tell you how to feel. When people always say, you shouldn't feel like that. Don't tell me how to feel. Those are my feelings. Now, whether they're justified or whether I'm right in my feelings, but those are my feelings. So if I feel anger, how dare you tell me not to be angry? You don't know what's making me angry. If I'm happy, how dare you tell me not to be happy because everybody else around me is miserable? So you can't tell me those things. But now what you can do is ask me to explain why I'm feeling like that. So if you get me to explain why I'm feeling like that, then we'll start the conversation that needs to be had.
Invite me to tell my story.
Exactly.
Right? So on that note, I want to ask you, there's a trigger word that's out there. It's been said all over the web, all over the news, systemic or institutional racism. There, I said it at the round table. It's on the table. You being a part of the criminal justice system in our society, that system is oftentimes implicated, indicted for enacting systemic racism. Let's just figure out what the term means to us at this table so we can kind of figure out how we're going to get at it. And I know everybody's got to return to their respective jobs, et cetera. So I don't expect anybody to just, to shoot yourself in the foot here. But if we can get away from talking points as much as possible and from our hearts and our own minds, kind of say what it means to you in your life.
Well, in my life, what it has meant is sometimes because of what you see, which is the color of my skin, but Wade said it, but I'm made perfectly in his image. And when he decided to create me on June 23rd, in the year that I was born, that was the image he had in mind for me. And when he created you on the day that he created you, that was the image that he created. That's why we don't look alike. And when he created Wade, but the thing about it is we're created perfectly in his image. So that means there's nothing wrong with me. So let's stop saying that something's wrong with me because you don't see what you see in yourself in me. So therefore I'm wrong because you don't see that. So when I start getting all of these misconceptions about what I should be, how I should act, what I should wear, how I should talk, what I should be doing and what I shouldn't be doing, therein to me starts racism, because racism doesn't only deal with color. Racism deals with gender. It deals with socioeconomic status. We're racist and all that because you think about it. And we've all been, so to say that we're not, we've all been guilty if someone mentions the Merc, for example. I work on the Merc. I've been working there 25 years. I work at Fayetteville State. I don't get mad. I don't get nervous about going to the Merc at night. Why should I? Why should I be uncomfortable? Because that's your story. That's not my story. So one of the things I think to deal with racism is that we should not absorb what someone else's misconception is about a situation or a thing and let that become our perception of it. So it's not my perception that all Black men are no good. Black men, white men, Black women, white women, children, adults, we're all no good at times. So that shouldn't be my perception of of what you take on. So one of the things to me at racism is we tend to, when we get comfortable in a set, that if they start believing those things and they start doing that, I take on those things and those things become my beliefs and my truths, as you said. When in reality, when I'm not around that group, those are not my truths.
And I will say those preconceived notions, those truths are not always obvious, right? They're not always conscious, right? And so I think it's important when we're talking about systemic racism, we're talking about how, when you said the Merc, instantly my gut does something. Oh, the Merc, that's a place you got to be careful. You got to be, you know what I'm saying? So if you know something happened on the Merc and you are a law enforcement officer or a daddy like me and you know your son's on the Merc, there's a certain way your body might change. A little bit of fear might come up because of the preconceived notions. Even though it's regular people, it's part of my community. But when we allow those preconceived notions to overtake our emotions, then we act differently when we get there. We're more tense. And when you're more tense, it's never a good thing for human interaction. I teach communication, right? So Johnny, you've taught me a lot about communication. And thank you so much for that. That makes so much sense to me. You've talked to me a lot about communication. How do you communicate and understand this term, systemic racism?
Yeah, it's, you know, it's unfortunate, but it is truth. It is truth. A lot of folks are born with a lack of limited resources, obviously. Some folks are born into one of their parents or both parents incarcerated. These things speak to Johnny Wilson's life. A lot of folks don't know it, but I can't tell you how many times where someone has said, Johnny, oh my gosh, your parents gotta be so proud of you. And my grandmother raised me. You know, I have yet to even meet my father in this world. And it hadn't stopped me for one moment being the best father that I could be and training other fathers to be the best that they could be, but more importantly, training other humans to be the best human that they could be. And so it takes us to get away. Yeah, data, statistics, all of those things are wonderful and fine, but they can't ever measure the value of what we can really do as humans when we're talking about these things as systemic racism or any other thing that we can try to tie a leash on. It's not going to cut it. Just as this young man said earlier, being educated in this, but more importantly, being exposed to other cultures and other backgrounds, understanding what inclusion is, it removes all of these things that you have so-called studied and read for hours that data was very, very misleading, very misleading. And so that's what we're going to have to get back to. That's what we're going to have to get back to. And in these conversations, again, as I said earlier, I'm fired up. They're going to continue. Folks get ready to continue to call out others, folks that are so-called your friends or family or colleagues. Call them out. What you just said or what I heard or what you believe, it isn't right. And let me tell you why. These are the conversations gotta have enough courage to have these. And for those folks that are, you know, say, hey, what should I do? Or I'm kind of scared or I'm fearful. I would say that's great. But more importantly, welcome, because these are the conversations Johnny has been having his whole entire life. And all you have to do is be thoughtful about it, and it's a win-win.
Yeah, I will say, Wade, I'm glad you're at the table because you are a rare person in my life. You are a conservative. I have several conservative friends, but you are a conservative friend who's ready and willing to come to the table and talk about these uncomfortable conversations. I feel like, you know, there's several white friends that I have that don't want to have these conversations because it's going to go, oh, I'm going to become like Drew Brees. I don't have to apologize. And what do I say? You know, but I'm like, you know what? Welcome to my world, because as a black man in the world, I'm always adjusting myself. Well, what do they expect from me? You know, how do I address, how do I represent my whole race? You know, and that's not always incumbent upon me, but sometimes I do feel like when I'm in environments where there are mostly non-black people, and that could be white people or anybody who's not white, not black, I do feel a sense of expectation, sometimes positive, sometimes negative, and it's a challenge. And so I wanted to come your way. I'm gonna go a little out of order, Tony, because again, you're the younger generation. I want to share a little something that in our background. But Wade, you and I met through WIDU, Fayetteville Urban Ministry, being out there in the street. You're in philanthropy, leadership. You're out there trying to make moves. At the same time, there are a lot of conservatives that I know that say, racism, it's a real thing, but it's really an individual one bad apple thing. There's not a larger racist issue we've got to deal with. But we're hearing here, about the notion of truth. In my experience, I've experienced that, and the notion of equity and inclusion, right? I'll say this statistic, and I'm sure you all have heard it, but a black child in America is 3 times more likely to live in poverty than a white child. A black child in Cumberland County is 4 times more likely to be suspended from school than a white child. And a black person is 5 times more likely to end up incarcerated than a white person in our country. And those things challenge me. And I have 2 conclusions. Either there's systemic racism at play that we can address, or it's just black people just must commit more crimes. That's just I'm hearing a lot of people kind of just let that go. And I just disagree, because I grew up in a family where people had done time in prison and I'd seen some crime, but there was no more crime in my household, in my family, than other families. I don't feel a natural propensity because of my blackness to commit crimes. It's not in me. So I know there must be several layers of things happening. I set you up for that.
No, that's fine.
To just ask, what's your take on systemic racism?
This is a really hard question, honestly, for me, because a lot of what I hear from I hate to use the term, but it's what we're using, black and white right now, but from black friends is, you can't understand it because you've never suffered it. But by the same token, I would suggest to you, you've not suffered being looked at because you're white and saying you're a racist.
I have to give you that.
I mean,
Right.
you know, it's like it's automatically, it's almost as if the systemic racism is something that is planned out by the white person to keep the black person down. And I'm just telling you from the people that I deal with, that's not the case. Now, this is the way I see it, and it's a reality that we've got to get through, is that we come from essentially different cultures. When you look at it as groups, there's different cultural expectations. You said, and you were saying it, I don't know how to say this because I've got how do I fit? Well, it's the same thing here. How do I fit into the expectations of what I'm supposed to say? And it's really hard. It really is hard to walk through life feeling like they're looking at me like I'm guilty all the time. It's just a different way of looking at guilt. Here you would say, it's hard for me to walk around looking at him thinking I'm a criminal, I'm guilty of crime. And where on quote, our side of the house, it's kind of hard to walk around here and have him looking at him. He's guilty of racism. And he's a part of the system. He's born. You know what? You didn't choose to be born black. I didn't choose to be born white. You brought that up, Judge. God made us the way He made us. So just like I can't hold you responsible for how you were born, it's kind of hard to be held responsible for how I was born. So the question is then, what do we do? And I go back again to the idea that we're all individuals, and we work individually, and we look at. And the other thing, too, is that I've often said this to people. I deal with things the way they are, not the way I want them to be. And then, how do I get them to be the way I want them to be? And we have a choice. We have a choice. There's 2 words that start with the same 4 letters, end with 2 different letters. But it makes a whole difference in your life. It's either victim or victor. And I liken it to sports. There will be things stacked up against you. The unfortunate reality, again, like I said, I deal with them the way they are, not how I want them to be. If you will, the reality of it is that there are more people that are white and come from a culture in America than there are people that are black that come from a culture in America. So how do we, on our side of the house, say, how do we understand better how to help and how to work? But the other thing is, don't sit there and think, oh, I have to help them because they can't help themselves.
Can I just interject that you said
Yeah,
that? And that's a great thing, because that goes to what Johnny was saying as well as you. And one way that we need to do that, and the reality is the perception of, Johnny said we have to level the playing field. The reality is we do, but the perception from your side of the house is leveling the playing field doesn't mean I want a hand out.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily even need a hand up unless I'm down and you're pulling me up. All I want you to do is close your eyes, because we're in here, and let's maneuver our way out. We've got to get out of this room the best way we can. This is who I'm assigned to. This is who I'm assigned to. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to survey this room. And in that 5 minutes, you all have to work with each other to get out of this room. Not looking at it, close your eyes and work. And if we do that, we're not looking, you black, you white, you make the decision, I make the decision. No, black people are smarter, white people are smart. When it comes to challenging, no, let's level the playing field. What are you better at? I'm better at thinking, I've studied this whole room. I know every exit out here. If something came up, you all would be left. I'm gone. I studied that, but I got that from my father. One of the things my father taught me early on is to always know your surrounding. And so if you level the playing field for me, I already know my surrounding. I know how I can be victorious. So I'm not going to be a victim. But all I'm asking you to do is, when we come to the table, everybody's at a table. Don't make my end rock and tell me I have got to sit at the end all the time that rocks because I got to hold it. And I shouldn't think that because you're over in this area that you should always have to sit at the end that rocks. Yeah. What we need to do is let's just treat everybody the same. We could say it all day long. It's not going to happen until we get to the point where we truly understand that we're all individuals. You know, and at the end of the day, if you get cut and I get cut, our blood is the same color, which is blue until oxygen hits it. Then it's red. So everybody said my blood is red. No, it's not. It's blue. That's why your veins are blue. But when that oxygen hits it, it turns red. And just like I tell folks, a bullet doesn't have a name on it when it projects from a gun. It doesn't say, okay, I know where I may be aiming it. But if it's all over here and something happens, that bullet could hit any of us.
Well, if I can give you a perspective on that, I'm going to go back to when I decided to run for elected position. You know, you did, I did, everybody has their reasons. I went for the very reason that I saw what I thought needed to be changed. Not so much, you know, it's kind of, this is where I talk about, where you're talking about leveling the playing field, and this is where I see the playing field being leveled, okay? We were looking at statistics, and, you know, of course, what was it Mark Twain said, you've got lies, damn lies, and statistics, so you can play statistics everyone, but the statistics were pretty clear about the consent searches. Well, for me, the principles are what is the playing field. That's what gets leveled. The principles are, you're free. We live in a free country. You're free, all of us. The principles are that if you work hard, you should have the opportunity to succeed. Doesn't mean that it's going to guarantee, but it does. The principles that lay out, frankly, godly principles, biblical principles, work for everybody. That's the field. And so the way I do that is, and the way I look for it is, how do I give everybody that opportunity to do that? How do I work within that confine? How do I exhibit love the way Christ did me? I go back to 1 Corinthians 13, you know, and the love chapter, and I'll just have to give you this from a personal experience, and it's just kind of a thing that helps you understand how it is. There's a conflict, okay? You ever had a blended family?
Yes.
That's conflict. My wife and I had conflict every night, just about, for the first 10 years of our marriage. After my wife died, her husband died, we got married, and it became ours. And it was hard. And so we had to take and sit down and go through what love meant. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love doesn't seek its own. We had to think about the other. I had to love my wife as Christ loved the church, meaning even when she's unlovable, I've got to love her. And that's the way we've got to look at people across the aisle from us. We've got to say, you know what? I'm called to love this person. I don't care if they're my enemy. I'm called to pray for my enemy. I'm called to not only think about myself, but think of the needs of others. And I'm to esteem others more highly than myself. To me, that levels the playing field. What you do with it at that point in time is yours. But that's how I think we should all treat one another. And I will tell you the perspective. Again, I'm just telling you stuff that I hear. It's not necessarily stuff that I agree with, because you want to hear the other side of the story. The other side of the story is, the impression is we've got to have equal results. And we're not always going to have equal results, even though the playing field's level, because different people are going to act different ways. But we want to equal the opportunities. We want everybody to have the opportunity. We want it to be equal. We want that table to be as level as we can. What you do with your opportunity is your thing. What I do with mine is mine. I'm part of an organization that has poured its heart out. We finally got our first black member, about a year ago. But it was a bunch of us white folk that would be looked at as, again, from the other side of the house, if you will. And I hate using that term, but I'm going to use it as just being, guys that don't care. You know what school we adopted? Ferguson Easley. We adopted a facility down in Robeson County that dealt with kids that were getting ready to go into the criminal justice system. They were being sent there before they ended up in the criminal justice system for counseling and help and all that stuff. This was a place where they actually had to be locked in their rooms at night. They could not get out of their room at night. But they had nowhere for counseling. We went and built a place for them to counsel, and we built them a deck, put picnic tables and all that so that they could have a life. See, to me, that's showing that you care about people. That's showing that, you know what, I don't care what you look like, I want to give you a field to play in that's level. We need to do more of that.
Taking
and we need to
action.
do it. But the thing about it is, too, is that we've got to take responsibility for our actions, no matter which community we're in. But most importantly, more than anything else, I need to be able to put my head on my pillow at night and say, God, I did what was right in your eyes, the best I could.
And we all need to say it, but I hear what you say, but I see what's being done. So I hear it. Because we all think alike.
Yeah.
But that's fine. I see you in need. I'm going to, without hesitation, I see you on the side, I'm going to stop. You see me? But I hear what you're saying, but are you going to do that same thing for that same person? I just had this conversation for the guy that I see all the time down here that is grungy, that's homeless, that you're going to do that, but the average person is not. But again, you've got to if you go to that agape love, I don't see that you are dirty and you smell all that. What I see is that you told me you are hungry. And see, that bothers me, because when someone says to me, can you give me money because I'm hungry? And I don't do that, what comes to my mind is says, I was hungry and you fed me not. What if I'm entertaining an angel right there? What if I'm being tried? I don't know. So do I try it? Yes, we've all been. I had an instance with my son and I but it turned my son to look at folks different that may be asking for money now, because he used to always have me stop. And one time a gentleman asked us to buy him, he was hungry. So I was in the drive-thru and I buy my son something and I get him something. And I turn back around and I give him the bag. But before I can pull off, my son sees him throw it in the woods. He wasn't hungry. So how do I tell my son, you still do it nevertheless? Nevertheless, that's one. So that's what systemic racism is. Just because that one person did that, there are folks who are homeless. There are folks that are hungry. So do I stop having a heart of compassion and be held accountable?
I think about that word race. I studied Spanish for a while, and raíz means race, but it also means root, right? It's the root of the matter and the root of how we think about people and how we deal with them. So when you say, Wade, evening the playing field, I think first there has to be an acknowledgement that the playing field is not always even, right? And it's not intentional, but when you think about the fact that abuse and poverty operate in cycles, generational cycles. It's very difficult to break out of abusive cycles, as you know, and very difficult to break out of cycles of poverty, regardless of your racial background. For years, centuries in this country, Black people especially have been legally and intentionally placed into cycles of abuse and of poverty. So when the Civil Rights Bill was passed in 1964, right, implemented in 1965, I believe, that didn't end all of those cycles. And then, of course, there was still Jim Crow to deal with and all those kind of things. And we're in a place now where we're better than we've ever been. And we have people like you and people like the people at this table who are trying to find ways to even the playing field. And I think what would be refreshing is if people would say, I want to even the playing field, but I see that it's uneven in some ways because there have been some cycles and systems set in place before I even got here. But I want to adjust those systems. But then at the same time, when I adjust them, I ought not be made to feel guilty because of and I'm going to say this trigger word, but I know people use my white privilege, right? And I will say, where I'm on your side on this one right here is, Wade, is that I have students. I teach at UNC Chapel Hill. I teach at Fayetteville Tech right now, and I've taught at UNC Chapel Hill. I have white students about your age, Tony, or younger than you actually, but white undergraduate students who are males, and they won't speak in my classes. It's a communication class. You're supposed to talk. But they're so careful because they know the field is uneven, or at least in your perception, your truth is uneven. And if I get on the field, then all of a sudden I'm the bad guy, right? Because people have made them to feel that way. And I have to go out of my way, just like you have to go out of your way to reach out and even the playing field in that classroom and say, everybody here gets to talk. I don't care who you voted for. I don't care how conservative or liberal you are. We are humans. We all have truths. And listen, your truth is your truth. My truth is my truth. But the truth is not going anywhere until it is reckoned with, right? And so I wanted to go to you, Tony, because you and I met when I was doing the Parchment Hour at Cape Fear Regional Theater. You were there with your mom, and the Parchment Hour was about the civil rights movement, right? A time when we could all agree at that time systemic racism was in full effect, right? It was emblazoned upon the psyches of America. But since then, we've developed and we've grown. But there are a lot of young people who are coming up and saying, nah, we haven't improved, or we haven't improved as much as we should. And it's time to stand up and say something. When I say the term systemic racism to you, what does that mean to you?
Humor me. You all have all played Monopoly before?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's say we sit and play a game of Monopoly right here. And we play for 400 rounds of Monopoly. And this entire time that we play Monopoly, You all don't get to make any money or keep any properties. Everything that you make and everything that you earn and all the cards that you get as you play come to me. And after 400 rounds of playing that game, we play for 50 more rounds. And I allow you to play this time. But as I see that you begin to catch up and learn how to work this game, I burn your cards, I burn your Monopoly money, and I burn your properties. This is Tulsa. This is Rosewood. You know, we've had many incidents where people will try to say like, oh, economically pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And when we've done that, we've been stomped out. So systemic racism looks like that game of Monopoly. Or when you have slaves being released from plantations when it's been abolished, and you have individuals who do not know how to read or write, but are expected to function normally in society, you still have to eat. If you can't get a job, possibly you may result to crime, like stealing whatever farm animals that were available, like pigs. So when you look at our prison system and somehow our laws are shifted around to where if you steal a pig, this is almost the same type of punishment or judicial action that you receive for murder, and now you're cycled back into the system that you mentioned. Or redlining, which is, you know, you have plenty of different systemic issues, which I do believe require systemic solutions, but this leveling of the playing field that we refer to requires people to have the same key to that map, because you may see one solution to be leveling the playing field while others may see something else. So it goes back to the individual that you talk about. And if you're mentioning individuals, we have to look at majorities versus minorities. So what is ailing the minority in that situation? And I'm glad that, you know, we have lots of perspectives that are coming from a background of faith. But even Jesus got upset and flipped tables in the church when things were not in order. You know, in Luke, he mentions you have, you know, 100 sheep and you lose one. Do you only care about the 99? Like that one matters. That Black life matters. And I feel that in that, for some reason, it's abrasive to the ears because it feels like your life doesn't it's not saying that only Black lives matter. We're saying that Black lives matter as well. That we are the minority in this situation, which is not a victim perspective. It's merely our living experience. There's a stark contradiction between people marching outside saying that I want free haircuts, well, not free haircuts, I want haircuts and tattoos, or I want to freely run in my neighborhood without being killed. There is an issue to address. And I think perceiving this issue as victimization is bypassing over 450 years of a rigged Monopoly game. It's not that easy of love your neighbor. You have to look at the root. You mentioned the root, the source. If you're not looking at the source and you're looking at the what, I take looting, for example. I am in no form supporting people who loot and break into businesses, but people focus on the what rather than the why this is happening. Have we talked about a financial gap? You have protesters, rioters, and agitators as well. People use these opportunities to go out publicly to vent. So if you have protesters who are caring about the community and voicing their opinion about what's going on, then you have rioters and agitators who may be anarchists or for whatever reason. Everybody has their role that they're playing. And together, if we focus on the why, we can alleviate that. I see all the time people quote Dr. Reverend Brother Martin Luther King about Junior. Thank you. Yeah, my fraternity would have my head for that. But like, I think that a lot of people like to quote him and talk about the peaceful protesting. And I think that he acknowledged the fact that until systemic racism is fixed, you will still see the agony of riots and looting. We had 110 cities participate when he was assassinated, and 6 days later, you have a Civil Rights Act passed. You have 6 days past these recent protests that we have, and our president has declared war on his citizens. We have a stark contradiction of the freedom that we're supposed to be pioneers of in this land.
Can I say two things that both of you touched on? One, when you were mentioning when people say Black Lives Matter, and the response is all lives matter. I was talking to Judge King and Attorney Cole Jordan, and we were talking about that. When someone says Black Lives Matter and their response is all lives matter, it likens into, you're not saying that all lives don't matter, but what we need to focus on right now, and the analogy that we were talking about when we were walking this weekend, he said, your house is on fire. We all live in the same neighborhood. You call the fire department. And when the fire department gets there, instead of going to your house first, you say, we live in this neighborhood too. No, we understand, but it's not about your house right now. We've got to save your neighbors. So if you love your neighbor, why did you even stop us? Because you too saw your neighbor's house on fire. So not that your houses don't matter, but we got to get to the house, the root of why we were called out here. We were called because this house in this neighborhood is on fire. So do we not save that house because your 4 houses are not on fire and you don't want that to jump over there? Or do we go stop that house and do we help that person? So we're not saying that our houses are not important. Our houses matter, and our houses are important. And another thing that you mentioned is Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You're right, you hit it. His letter in Birmingham, everybody has quoted every good thing. There's no justice until you, all of the positive things. But what he said in his letter in Birmingham was that when we peacefully march, when we peacefully do the things, when we get the permits, when we come because I was invited, not because the Freedom Riders just rode in, the Freedom Riders being black and white, all of us, that's not why we're here. We were invited. But when you don't hear us, the only thing you understand is riot. I don't agree with looting and people working hard. But what happened is, because that happened, now you're forced to pay attention. You're forced to pay attention because I hit a nerve. You were not paying attention when that nerve wasn't hit. So when it was peaceful and their marching, they had a powerful prayer yesterday in front of the police department. They called it a protest, a prayer protest. There was not one issue, not one, folks, black, white, purple, gold, all people, straight, gay, whatever. Everybody was down there worshiping together. Everybody did everything together. Nobody saw anybody there but for the same cause. Why are we all here? We are all here because we want to get to answer the why. Why are we all here? Because we all care about this city that we all live in. And we all play a role in that. And so until we, it's good to, like I said, I hear what you say, but I see what you do. So I need them to marry up to each other.
And I want to ask you, Wade, Tony, I said that you and I met during Mike Wiley's Parchment Hour. I should say Mike Wiley wrote this wonderful play about the Freedom Riders of 1961. And I played Stokely Carmichael in that. And one thing that I learned from doing that piece was that the white males who traveled down into the South to integrate the interstate transportation system, they took the worst beatings because they were breaking the lines, right? And they were saying, nah, I see some unevenness here. I want to be a part of the solution. And they took the worst beatings. And Wade, and I'm going to come back to you, Tony, but Wade, I know that part of your campaign when you went into city council was, hey, this driving while black thing, not cool. I know I'm not black, but I see some discrepancy here. Let's talk about the facts. How do we explain the concept of Black Lives Matter to more conservative white people and let them know, I'm not coming for your whiteness. I think you're great. Your life matters, but your life has always pretty much mattered here. I feel like, in my truth, my personal experience is that my life has not mattered. And that's why I'm saying Black Lives Matter. How might we get that point across to people?
You're a communications guy. It really is communications. And honestly, it's the same thing for us coming back the other way. The fact that we say that we believe in these things doesn't mean that we think you're a bad person or whatever. This is just, like for me, the things that I believe work for the good of people that quote conservative principles, I think they work exceptionally well for everybody, not just for white people, not just for Asian people, not just for Hispanic people, not just for black, but for everybody. And so it's kind of the same thing, is that, you know what, if you can understand where we're coming from, we don't have a sense of safety that you have. And that doesn't mean that I don't care about your life, that I only care about black lives. I care about yours too. But you're not feeling the sense of for lack of, I don't know how to put it exactly right, but lack of safety that I feel.
The
What does it
urgency.
make
The urgency.
So how do I help you understand this reason for why I don't feel safe, and how do we make something happen? It doesn't mean I don't care about you. As a matter of fact, I do. But what I'm seeing is that from my perspective, I'm saying
You're a
now
black
I'm
man.
Sonny. Now I'm Sonny.
Okay.
I'm Sonny saying from my perspective.
Okay, I was like, well, you don't feel safe? Wait a minute. Okay.
No. I'm talking from a Sonny perspective, or a Johnny perspective, or a Tony perspective, and saying, here's the deal. I don't feel as safe as you do. Okay, and here's why. Help me out here. That doesn't mean that I don't want you to feel safe. I want to. I want to feel as safe as you do. That's kind of how you can explain it better, so that it's not, because when it comes out and you've got a bunch of people and they're angrily saying Black Lives Matter, what you're doing is you're looking at a lot of people who really think, yeah, they do, but everybody else does. It's like, you think I don't give a darn about you.
And our safety is not.
And that's not where it is. So it comes across instead of if you will, a cry, it comes out as an accusation. And like I said, you really don't understand what it's like to walk in line and see somebody like Tony come up, who I don't know, who's walking by me looking at it and say, you know what? He's probably thinking I'm a bigoted white racist, that I think I'm better than he is. Because
But society has made us start thinking separation is better to separate us than to pull us together.
And I thought, and I'll just tell you, this is a thing that perplexed me. I want to tell you a thought that's going, I can't put this on anybody else. It's a perplexing thought in my mind, so I think it could be on others. And it's a part of the dynamic we have. We spent a long time with the civil rights movement saying we want people to be the same. And of course, I heard over and over and over and over again, Martin Luther King, we don't want to be judged by the color of our skin, but by the content of our character. Mm-hmm. So, and it was true. I mean, there was a time when whites would look at each other and look for their character, but they'd look at blacks and say,
content of our skin.
Yeah, the color of your skin. So, I get it. But it seems like now we're going to where I really want you to look at my skin and make a difference. And so it's a little bit of, it's kind of a hard thing to process. It's like, I don't want you to do it, but I do want you to do it, but I don't. And so I think really what we need to do is get a group of people that can sit down, good leaders that can sit down and can look at each other and say, why don't we together figure out, what does it really look like when we've hit the point? What does that look like? Is it on numbers? Is it on this? Is it on that? What is it? Because that, until we understand, if I don't understand what it really looks like in your mind to have it look, and you don't understand what it looks like in my mind to have it, then we're always going to be kind of at cross purposes. You know what I mean? So just for an example, and again, I brought this up, and it's so hard, but I think of it as like an athletic contest. And it's almost like you got two teams, and both teams want to succeed, and so I'm going to do whatever I can to stop you, and you're going to do whatever you can to stop me, and one team's going to win.
I think that's the problem with that mentality.
Yeah.
I don't think that it's a race like against people. I think that one team is trying to live, and there's another force that's preventing that or has issue with that.
That's what I mean. That's exactly what I meant. There's a team that's saying, I don't want you to succeed. I want to succeed. And you watch a football game, those guys on that line want to do whatever they can to keep the guys on that line from getting their stuff accomplished. And so it comes across that way. Instead of us trying to figure out how we're on the same team, trying to make the whole team succeed. Does that understand? In other words, you're an entrepreneur. Correct. Here's what I want. I want you to succeed to the greatest possibility ever. And you know what? I actually hope you succeed more than I do.
And at the same time,
and that's the attitude I would like to take with people, that we would take with each other and say, you know what, Tony, good on you. You are doing the thing. What can I do to help you succeed?
and his success is not mutually exclusive
with
your success, right?
That's right.
Here's my
and
challenge.
that's the way we're looking at it.
That Tony doesn't have the circles or the network to walk into a room and get money the same way you do. Because you've got a history, right? A family history, a racial history.
I get it. But you know what? He just made a contact.
True. Now we're talking about some action.
See, that's what. But I mean, seriously. And the point really is, take the time to understand the system. Take the time to understand the system, and there is a system that seems to be working. And honestly, I'll be honest, it is a little tougher right now because you haven't had the context, because you haven't been in the system for 450 years, okay? But if you get into that system and you understand, you know what? Here's what I do, I make context. One of the things I taught my kids all my kids growing up, I said, it is so important for you to build as many contacts, as many lists as you can make. You know what? And it doesn't matter whether it's somebody that's important or not important. I was a drug rep for 18 years. 18 years.
That's what we have in common. Who do you work for? We won't say the names, but I did
But
too.
anyway,
I did
I
too.
worked for 18 years. And let me tell you what, I was a successful drug rep. I made it into my company's Hall of Fame because you know what? There was not anybody in that office that wasn't important to me. Yeah. From the front desk person to the nurse's aide, to somebody working in the lab, because you never knew who in there might have a contact that could help you. And there was a tough office to get into that a lot of reps could not get into, and I got into it all the time. Because I made a relationship with the gatekeeper.
There you go. Because you made a relationship. You treated everybody as if they were important. You met them where they were. When you walked in the front door, you said, "Hi, ma'am, how are you doing? How's your day going?" The janitor came, you talked to the janitor. But see, we've got to get to the point where we do not think because of what I look like that I've already started 3 steps above. Like
but
when we get in
the
here.
other thing, if I can interrupt, I'm sorry, but the other side of it is you can't think because this guy's going to look at me what I look like and he's not going to pay attention to me to say, you know what, I'm going to get his attention.
Oh yeah, I'm saying you do that.
I'm going to get to know who is the mover. You know, for you, who are the movers and shakers? I don't care whether they're white, black, or whatever in this town that I need to get to know, and move it through. Because until we start doing that, until those who are in a position to help are willing to hear from somebody who needs help, and the person who needs help is not afraid to say, you know what, I'm going to knock on that door until I get an answer.
But we have to have the perspective of when I'm coming to you and I say I need help, that you don't perceive it as I want a handout. I want you to give me something. I'm not, because I will work hard. I will put in the hours. I will do the same thing and probably even more. But I need you to have that in that too. We all have it. I need you to have in your mind when he comes to talk to you, he's not coming to look for you to give him 6 bottles of water because he's thirsty. What he's looking for is for you to tell him how he can not only get those 6 bottles of water, but how he can dig his own well. So when he's thirsty, he don't have to keep coming back to you to ask you for a bottle of water. He can go get his own water because he's planted seed.
That's right.
So what we need you to understand is when I'm coming to ask you for help, what I'm asking you to do is plant seed and water it. And if you plant seed and water, it's gonna grow.
Absolutely.
But we've got to have that perception and not that I'm coming to get the harvest that you've already planted.
Well, I can tell you again. I'm only speaking for myself, but I think it goes for a lot of people that I know that I work with, that I refer people to or whatever. Is that for me? I don't take into my determination whether you're black, white, Asian, or Hispanic when I'm going to refer you to somebody. What I look at is, what are you planning to do?
Exactly.
What do you plan to do? What do you want to do? How do you want to succeed? You want to do that? It's somebody that's got to drive. Had a young lady that I know wanted to go to Carolina. She was trying to figure out, all you Duke fans, sorry, she wanted to go to Carolina. She figured out, I don't know how I'm going to get into Carolina. But I knew her. I knew how hard she worked. I knew what she did in school. I knew all that stuff. I knew everything, and I knew her life set that she was in, that was not the easiest life set to be in. I happen to know one of the big donors at UNC Chapel Hill. I asked for this donor to write a letter of recommendation. I referred her to this after having met with,
and you
did it, and she got in.
Exactly.
And it's just the same thing. It's the same thing for anywhere. If you're looking to get ahead, we should be looking to help people get ahead. And the worst thing that can happen for people is, it's like the crabs in the bucket, you know? That old analogy where the one crab's already got the lips, so everybody else tries to grab him, go over, and none of them get out because they keep pulling each other down. Get ahead of me, my friend.
Go.
Be more successful, because you know what? When you're more successful and I've helped you get there, you're going to have a circle of friends I'm going to need. And I can come to you. And that's the mentality we have to have.
And I will tell you, I think and I'm gonna go to you, Tony, because I know I can see you. I got a thought on that. One of the things that we see, that I personally see, I'm gonna speak for myself, growing up as a black person in America, is that I see among white people, they can be mediocre, but if they got the right family ties, the right connections, and people in my experience, people just kind of tend to relax around white people. When they see a black person, when they hear me speak and they hear my PhD language, and oh yeah, he's one of the good ones. I'm lighter skinned too. But typically we see a black person, your hair is different, you've got a beard. They pause. Is it Tony the black filmmaker or Tony the filmmaker, right? So I say all that to say that when I walk into a room or deal with folks, it's hard sometimes for me to make those connections when I'm different, right? Like I said, I've known a lot of mediocre white people growing up who did great because mom and dad and their community came around them. I've known a lot of exceptional black people who've met a person like you and made a connection, and then a lot of exceptional black people who did not meet a person like you and didn't make a connection, and they fell into part of the inequity, right? And so the exceptional ones of us, like the folks at this table, we tend to do well and connect. Thank God we meet people like you, Wade, but then the ones who are just doing well and on track, the opportunities don't seem to be as free flow. They're not for me. They're not as free flowing. And I think that's the concern I have is how do we adjust that? So Tony, I'll go to you, but I know you have some thoughts on that.
Absolutely, I share the same sentiments. I think that it's important for us to, yes, find allies, but there are few and far in between. I think that you mentioned something interesting earlier as far as it being hard. Yes, it's difficult. It's difficult on both sides, but I would say that if it's going to be sides, that there is an uneven balance of what difficult adversities that you face. Simply because if I'm going to network with allies and move forward, they have to have that same type of accountability, which is understanding that key to that map. So although you may not actively participate in racism, it does not mean that you don't benefit from its system. So like you may not actively be holding Klan rallies or whatever, but it doesn't mean that if two people walk into a room, I don't have to work twice as hard to make that connection. And it's not that I'm entering in with a preconceived notion that these people don't like me. It's a preconceived notion that when I look at my resume of the things that I've achieved and I look at someone else's resume who doesn't look like me, who hasn't achieved as much, but is much farther, I have to question and analyze what it is. And honestly, my father served almost 40 years in law enforcement. I am absolutely someone who adheres by the law, and I have a respect for it. So when I approach a situation, I always think to myself, like, what could I have been doing better? Not necessarily who's holding me back or who's putting me down. Like, I understand that we do have a responsibility to do our own. So when I exhaust myself and zoom out and take a look at it, and it's still uneven, I think that educating people to create more allies, which I don't think is solely an African American's responsibility to do, more so on the allies' responsibility, because for me to educate and mourn at the same time is taxing. For over 450 years, you're trying to explain in a Facebook post over statistics and reasons and why, but you're also burying your sons and daughters. It's hard, as you said.
Yeah. Well, the thing about it is, though, also, how quickly do you overturn 450 years of inertia is another question. We all want it to happen now. So the question is, are we continuing to make progress? What do we try to do? What can I do to help? And if each individual person says that, you know what we're going to do? I don't know if you know about Great Oaks.
Yeah, the mentoring program.
Mentoring program. I worked with them for a number of years on that. Going in, I was brought in to teach them about sales.
Yeah.
You know, so again, the thing of it is, though, and again, I understand the perception of what we have and where, but by the same token, you know what? It's kind of hard to sit here and say, you know what, I didn't work. I mean, I worked my butt off. I did.
I think everybody at this table can say
everybody
this.
has. But the thing that it is it's still. I'm just, again, because we're talking about communication and what people hear. Yeah. You know, so a lot of the people here is like, well, you're thinking like, it's almost like you're saying the only reason that I'm successful, and I'm not saying you're saying this, I'm just saying the guy that's here and is saying, you're thinking the only reason I'm successful is because I'm white and it's built for white people. And then you could sit there and say, well, he's only saying I'm not making it just because I'm black, not because I'm not good enough.
We internalize these things.
And it gets internalized. Right. And so that's why conversations like this are really important to get us to get this stuff out and figure out, well, you know what? We really are all in this together. How do we help one another? How do we keep people out of the criminal justice system so they don't have to come and see you and go sit down?
And that's why only inclusion saves us. You know, you have to be exposed to different cultures, different characters, different personalities to understand that, to help people be understanding of, yes, I did. I worked my rump off to get to where I'm at. And not only did I get to where I'm at, I'm mentoring Tony. I'm mentoring Sonny, you know. And so you get it, Wade. You certainly get it. But it's going to take everyone as an individual to examine themselves and their household to go out of your way. To go out of your way. Oh, I don't have time for that. Oh, I don't know what other people will think of me and say, no. No, you have to go out of your way to learn today. And that's what it's going to take.
And you got to be willing to be uncomfortable. Listen,
Absolutely.
Let me tell you about being uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
I ran for the state Senate, and at that time it was Senate 21. I was in Senate 21, which is a majority district. And I'm invited to go to a forum at Seabrook Auditorium during primaries where there were 5 Democrats running in the primary, and I'm the lone Republican, and I'm the one that doesn't look like everybody else. You know how uncomfortable that is? But you know what? I did it. And it turned out then that Eric Mansfield won the primary. And you know what? When there were not lack of debates, but forums that were put on by different groups, quote, liberal, quote, conservative, the only 2 candidates that you could count for sure being at all of them was Eric Mansfield and me, because we were both willing to be uncomfortable in front of people. And I will tell you, there was one that was put on by the, quote, Tea Party, and Eric Mansfield was the only Democrat that showed up. But he was willing to be uncomfortable, to say what he believed in front of people that needed to hear what he had to say. Now, they can make their decision however they want, and it's the same thing here. And then on election night, I gave him a hug and said, you know, congratulations, you're the first man I met that could beat my butt worse than my daddy did when I was a kid, but that was it. But, and we had substantive conversations. Right. We never said a negative word about each other. I wish politics would get away from the negative crap, because that helps the divide get even worse. Indeed. Let's talk about issues and give our opponents credit for what they do. We need to stop ascribing motives to people that we don't know.
Case by case, right? You said it beautifully. We need to move from diversity, which is different people at the table, which is great. We're all beautiful. But diversity just means difference. It is inert. It can't do anything until you turn it into inclusion, right? So a friend of mine told me this. Diversity is like that new toy, True Pettigrew, wonderful educator and motivator. He said, diversity is like that new toy you get on Christmas morning, right? And you go open it up, and you're so excited to play with it, and you realize it's not working, because its batteries not included. Inclusion is those batteries that you put into it and it can do what it's called to do, right? So Johnny, to your point of the power of inclusion, what I wish I saw more of, to be honest with you, Wade, is more conservative white people who were willing to be uncomfortable, include themselves and include others, because that's part of the privilege of being white. Now, again, I don't like to use that term because I know what it does. And I hear your heart. I know when people throw white privilege at you, right on behind Black Lives Matter, it creates a scenario where you feel vilified. And in some cases, to be honest, I feel like you are being vilified as a white person. There are some people that I've heard use the term white privilege in a very punitive way. So I get that. At the same time, there's a privilege that you have where you don't really have to be uncomfortable unless you want to be. You didn't have to go to Seabrook. You still could have gotten a lot of votes and done your thing. We have to go into a world full of people that don't look like us, whether we like it or not. Now, I happen to love it because I love people, but I'm always kind of the minority. So I'm thankful that you've known that perspective, because it gives you a compassion and a place to connect. But I also challenge the rest of us to look at the fact that a guy like Wade, who comes to the table saying, I want to be part of the solution, should not be made to feel wrong or bad or bigoted or racist just because he's white, just because he's conservative, just because he's Republican, right? So we all need to meet each other in that place.
And what I'm saying is we need to not be so concerned and committed and obligated to a party. And let's be obligated and committed, we've all said the thing, to human beings. Because you can't tell me that you are going to, if I've heard your conversation, I've known you for years since I've been a DA and since.
Speaking of which, you were one that would come out and cover. You came to Republican events.
That's what I said. I have been the only minority in a room full of Republicans, a room full of Republican white men, and just Republican women. And I've been the only one there. But I was going there to tell them what I was bringing to the table other than my appetite. And so I bring something to the table other than my appetite, but I need to also be reassured and comfortable when I go to sleep that my son gets that same opportunity. I need him to just be able like you. He's younger than you. And yeah, he gets some privileges because of who his mother is. But his friends don't get that same privilege because of who their parents are. But I tell him, no. I'm like, this is what I worked hard for. So you're not going to completely ride on my coattail. You can pull it, but you're not going to ride on it. Because it was blood, sweat, and tears that I stayed up. I had a white guidance counselor that told me that I shouldn't probably think about going to college. Even though I went to a primarily white school, I graduated. And I was great when I was running track. We were great, but she told me I probably should start at a community college. Now, even though I was an honor student graduating, that's what she said to me because that's what she was taught as a guidance counselor to tell me. And then on graduation day, when she saw all the scholarships that I was getting, she then says, I think you might be okay. I think. And then,
thank you for the vote of confidence.
And it was benevolent, though. She wanted what was best for you, right?
She wanted. She
even
did
in
not
that benevolence.
think. She did not. But the fact that she felt that comfortable to tell me that. And then, so I go to college and then I go to law school and I graduate and I go back to her and she's perplexed. You did what? I say, yes. I've graduated. I'm getting ready to start. Wow. And like you said, so I've been willing to put myself in a place that's uncomfortable. So we've got to have more people like Wade, because I went back to my home county, going into my third year of law school. And if you could believe, I was the first African-American intern that they'd had in the DA's office.
Wow.
In 1989.
Wow. One more reason you're proud of
I was the first African-American intern. They had never had one to come back. But the reason I was able to get that is because there were community leaders, black and white, that went to the then elected DA and said, give her, he knew where I came from, he knew my past, he knew my background, let her come in there. And the thing about it, but I did see white privilege because I went in there to work and learn and get, and the ones that were working with me there, I had two from Columbia, one from Cornell Law School, and one from Brooklyn Law School. They came in like half a day, worked for an hour and left, and made them sign off on that they worked all of these hours every day. But I worked because I wanted to get something out of it. But like you said, my playing field wasn't level. And one day I left early, and one of the receptionists, we were looking for you yesterday. Where were you? But you never, so, but we've got to deal, like you said, we've got to be uncomfortable and understand, but that was just what was planted in her. That's what she always known. They'd never had somebody that looked like me.
That wanted to do what you wanted to do?
Exactly.
Or whatever.
So
or at least
she needed
express
to know.
they wanted to do what you wanted
She
to do.
needed to know my every move to make sure I was not someplace that I shouldn't have been. And I constantly had to show where I worked for and for, till one day one of the guy that I worked for, who was like the number 2 person, said, she has a kid, leave her. So we've got to be uncomfortable and understand what's been taught to us. Because I'm a firm believer that you are a product of your environment, but you don't have to stay there.
No
Can
doubt.
I give some hope?
No doubt.
I just want to, you're leading to exactly where I want to go. I want to say one thing that all 5 of us have in common is a sound respect for hustle. We're all hustlers in our own right. And also a desperate desire for hope and a commitment to hope. That's why we're at this table. So give some hope, Wade.
First of all, my hope comes from my faith, which is we have a sovereign God and there's a reason for all this happening. And he knows what he's doing. But the other hope is you're going to see a change in the population because the younger population tends not to be as, at least as far as their relationships, tend not to be as structured around race. You're seeing a lot more interracial marriage, which you would never have seen before. And as you see more and more and more interracial marriage, there's not going to be a lot of color differences. And it's going to take a number of generations. but it's going to happen.
We'll be beige very soon.
And so
That year is supposed to be about 2050. I don't know if we'll all be around.
So, but the point is, at that point, it takes away a lot of it. It takes away a lot of it. So I have hope there. And the other part is, I have hope in the human spirit. But there's a caveat there. We can look at any kind of enacting of laws, policies, procedures, whatever else. If we don't have a heart change, we're not going to see anything different. Now, we're fallen human beings. There's always going to be some rancor between people. I mean, if you look at the statistics, more blacks are killed by blacks, more whites are killed by whites. Crime happens. That's why we have judges. That's why we have jails. That's why we have police. That's just a factor of our fallen nature. But I think this divide that is done along racial lines is going to have to diminish over time, simply because of the fact that you're finding Asians and whites, blacks and whites, blacks and Asians, Hispanics. They're all. It's an intermingled thing. Culture is not going to be as big a divider as it has been, and I think that's a good thing. I think for a later discussion, we'll get into socioeconomics, because that is becoming an increasingly powerful force that puts people into cycles as well. I'll tell you all this. We're in Fayetteville, home of the 82nd Airborne Division, home of a lot of special ops folks. And I've had the privilege of meeting a lot of people in special ops, the Rangers, Army Rangers, people who have put themselves through the most grueling training to do some of the most amazing things, right? Fighting for freedom, or at least fighting for our country, across the globe. And I met a man at the YMCA one day, retired Army Ranger. He said, you know what, I've learned to be deliberate in my discomfort, to make myself uncomfortable deliberately. And I said, man, that's heavy. That's powerful. It's what you've done, Wade, by going to places where you're not always the majority. It's what we're continuing to do like this
by
table.
coming into the like this table. And it's what we're continuing to do by.
We've welcomed you with open arms.
I know, but
I know you're playing.
Exactly. And so what I want to find us a way to do is to get to a place where we become deliberately uncomfortable, or engage in deliberate discomfort. So with that said, how are we going to do the hard work, the uncomfortable work going forward? We're going to that courses of action part, right? We start with critical conversations, move to collective consciousness. I think we've agreed on several things. There's some stuff we can still flesh out, but now let's move to action, y'all. I think it was Killer Mike, or Michael Render, the rapper Killer Mike he said on TV the other day, he said, listen, you can talk the talk all you want, but I want to see people walk the walk. So how are we going to walk the walk here in Cumberland County? And I'll just leave that open, popcorn around. What are some things we can do now to make a difference and be better together?
Well, I think for us, for starters, Fayetteville, we have a lot of it right. You look at Judge Cheri Siler-Mack here, you look at Wade, look at Tony, yourself, you look at our city council makeup, our mayor, our sheriff. These are a lot of positions and a lot of situations where we have a huge diverse population, the melting pot, a lot of minority leadership. And so we need to scream aloud and proud to the entire South and to the United States. Look, we're doing a lot of things right here. So we need to display that and illustrate that even better and beyond. And so just to Wade's point and everyone else, as you all have backed this, we have to keep going back to the U word, uncomfortable. And you just said, gotta go out of your way. Just because, Cheri, whenever you display to your son about giving the man that was in need, the homeless man, something to eat, and then your son saw him throw it over into the woods, it doesn't mean that you won't do that again, because that's a part of your character. You will not let him deter how your character is really built and instilled. And so that's what we have to keep doing. We've got to continuously call people out on it. When it doesn't look right, when it ain't right, when someone says it's not right, no matter whether they're black, blue, orange, or red. Hey man, that's not cool what you just said. Hey young lady, that's not cool what you just did. We got to call people out on it. And it's that simple. And that takes courage too. And guess what? When folks are mindful of that, that brings an awareness, and it also brings some more education. It's not cool, and we gotta stop it. We're in 2020, and we've come too far to be catapulting ourselves way back decades ago. we don't need this. But we've got to challenge everyone and call them out on it.
We've got to be intentional, is what he said. We've got to be intentional about being uncomfortable. So you got to be intentional about it. Silence is acceptance. So be intentional about being deliberate, about being uncomfortable, about doing the right thing. So if we do those things, we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay, but we've got to be able to be okay with someone cussing you out. Like in my courtroom, a young lady cursed me out yesterday, and their eyes got this big. Judge, she was out of control. But had I given her that same energy, and at the beginning, at first, I started I was telling her, bring it down, and then as my energy, I like you said, I've got to take that control back. I shifted the atmosphere, and I told her, first of all, you're not in this how I talk. You're not going to talk like that. You're not going to do these things. I said, and what you're going to do is walk out here like the nice young lady that you are. She said, I'm not nice. I said, well, be that as it may, if that's your decision, but you will walk out here as a young lady because you are a female. I said, and bring it down, and I'm going to, and I completely, she was out of control. And so my clerk looks over and said, I don't know how you did that. But like you said, I shifted the atmosphere back, and I allowed myself to be uncomfortable in front of a room full of people that knew I had all the power, and I let her be who she was, but I did not let her have my control and my power. I took it back, because had I gone back and forth with her, they were, oh, she went off the judge. But what they said was, Judge dealt with her with compassion. And before she left, she walked out there differently than she was. She didn't agree. That's right. She didn't agree with what I did. She didn't like what I did, but she respected it because I respected her. Because I told her, I'm not going to talk to you like that, and I'm not going to have you talk to me like that. And it just shifted. So now when she comes back to see me, her whole demeanor is going to be different because, like you said, I gave her power that she thought the only way she could get it was being belligerent, disrespectful, and cussing off. That's not who you are, and that's not who you're going to be in front of me. So I called her out at what she did. So I was deliberate. And so we got to do that.
Thank you. We talk about being victors and not victims, right? We all have different levels of privilege in different social contexts. How do I use my power and my privilege as a professor, right? As a judge in that moment to empower people, encourage people, and to check people, to draw them in, call them in, not just call them out, right? Tony?
You took the words right out of my mouth. I definitely want to say compassion, respect, calling people out, accountability. We're all accountability buddies. That's what we are at this table. Having this talk, we're holding each other accountable for that. And leaning towards the discomfort, I think that's about the privilege. Like, you have privileges as a white man, you have privileges of lighter skin tone, you have privilege as a woman, you have privilege to afford that suit. But I have privilege as being a college student. Not everybody has these. So like, we have to, I don't want to even say weaponize, we have to lean towards the usefulness of our privilege to make more Wades. And for me to educate and create more Veritas, we have to multiply these tables that we have to make more of that, and it's up to us. So despite whether we're a part of the problem, we still may be benefiting from those things. We have to make a choice to create more of ourselves.
I think Wade said it better. We've got to be intentional about not being afraid of you being more successful than me. I've got to be okay with you making 75 cents and me making 60 cents. But the thing about it is, we both are making something, as opposed to me pulling you down, you not making the 75 cent, me not making the 60 cent, and we're both here. I've got to be encouraged to be an encourager to you. He's serious when he says, if I see you, because then my chest is going to go out. I knew him. I helped him. Right. I'm in his circle. I'm part of it. That's what he's going to say. But because like with Johnny and I from college, I was on the board that hired him. I was like, you got to get him. You got to get him. We've got to have him. Big basketball, young guy, still coming straight out of Methodist, still going. I promise you, we will never regret the first day we hire him, because he will do for this business things that have never been done. He will bring and touch lives, and he's done that. And so it's like they're saying, he started from the bottom, now he's here. I mean, he started from our one-on-one, governor's one-on-one program, all the way to Find a Friend, all the way to Urban. He worked, nobody gave him anything, but he went in with the mindset of, I'm going to work really hard to get as far as I can get, but what I'm not going to do is forget to bring other people with me, and I don't care what they look like. I'm going to bring other people who have the same heart and compassion to do what I do in this area so that we can all benefit. So I think we all have the same mindset as, I don't care how big a piece your pie is. If we're all hungry, we just need something to eat. And so we all have that. And so we've got to get people to the mindset of, don't worry about becoming a glutton and eating till you're full, because that's one of the 7 deadly sins. How about you eat so that you're not hungry? And so that's where we've got to keep that hunger to get us where we need to be, which is where we're not. But we can get there. I'm hopeful too. I'm very hopeful, Wade, because if you look at all of us, we're all connected. We all are mixed with something. We're all biracial. My great-great-great-grandfather was the slave owner in Siler City, which is my name. I don't tell people that being embarrassed by it. I tell them to be proud, because look at how we've crossed. We were Black, we're white. I have some pure white cousins that didn't decide. I have some Black cousins that married. I think when my dad died, one of my coworkers said it best. When she went to my dad's funeral, she said, I was shocked. You all had every color of the rainbow there. But it was the love that we did. So I'm hopeful too. We can be, and I'm hopeful that your generation and my son's generation is going to be the generation to make us open up thine our eyes so that we may see.
As long as we come to the table with more than an appetite.
I need you to bring more than your appetite.
You actually brought it up, and I was going to mention it. We actually are all people of color. I mean, you know, some of us just have more melanin than others, but we're all, you know, of color.
That's why we're all made in that perfect
And mine,
image.
mine's a little bit because I got some Cherokee in me.
Yeah.
That's why I turned kind of a reddish brown in the sun.
Speaking of red, I was thinking about lobsters. I love your picture of being the crabs in the pot. It's like, just go, you get out, you know, it's not about pulling each other down. It's like, you go, if I can invest in that one, right? I see that picture.
But I would also like to ask us to think about things, and this is this thing, and it's a hard thing to ask somebody who's been on the, if you will, on the low end of the playing field, is instead of looking at the playing field not being level, look at it as a level playing field in this respect. And the principles of success are the same, okay? The principles of success are the same for you as they are for me. Now, and that to me is the playing field. What happens is on the playing field there are other players. And I'm going to go back again to the football. If you look at a football team, you've got Black players, you've got white players, you've got Hispanic players, you've got Asian players. They're all working on the same team, but they're working against.
And now you have women.
Yeah, but they're working against another team. That team is trying to do whatever they can to block them from being successful. But this team still has to work within the rules of the field to be successful. And if they get caught breaking the rules, they get a penalty. These guys, they get caught breaking, they get a penalty. So we look at the playing field, and I say, I'm looking at the playing field, I'm looking at the rules of the playing field. How do I take advantage of those rules for me to win on that game? Who do I know that can help me do that? Who's a coach I can have that can help me, that's been around longer, that's seen it, and do that, and make this thing successful? Because here's why. As you learn to do that, you become the coach for the next guy that needs it, and the next guy that needs it, and the next gal that needs it, or whoever. You're there working it through. And that's kind of the way I look at it. I break things always back down to principles. And there are principles that work and principles that don't. And you know, you're in the business world, so there are principles in that business world that work, and there are ones that don't. And so if you operate by those principles and you realize that people are going to lay obstacles in front of you, but I'm going to figure out how to work within that system to get past those obstacles, how to find somebody else that can help me bypass that hurdle and get to here, you will be so successful you can't even begin to imagine, and you will be able to take that and give it to somebody else. And that's really what I want us to see in the way of implementation, is to figure out, it goes back to, let me not think about my own interests, but the interests of others. How do I help somebody else? Because if all I'm thinking about, and this is what I tell my kids, It's what I try to tell people. You are never going to be happy. You are never going to be truly happy if all you think about is yourself. Because it will always not be good enough. There will always be a little something else I can get. But if you think about other people and how you can help other people get to be successful and to get things and to do things and to have the kind of life you've had, there is this sense of satisfaction that passes anything else you could do where you do it for yourself.
And I will say
And
this.
so that's what we need to do, I think, in the way of actions.
Yeah, and I was going to say, so that's your action. It's connecting to each other, that deliberate discomfort. Many of my mentors, the people invested in me, did not look like me at all. The director of my show, The Talk, is a white Jewish man from Ohio named Joseph Meagle, and I love him, and he loves me, and we love the story. And I think one thing we'll do next time is we'll just go around and tell some stories too, because I love hearing y'all's stories and your background. And Wade, you've already given a great example too of investing in the schools, investing locally, folks putting money, time, talent, and treasure into places where we know there are kids who need more encouragement and resources. So thank you. So I want to say, Tony, what's your action plan?
Education. I think that there are a ton of leadership programs that people can get involved with. I would love to see a lot of, you said learn the system. I think that a lot of that education should be implemented into freshman seminar. Mm-hmm. You're just now a young budding student who can comprehend, you can vote now. Like that should be integrated just as much as navigating your university. So I think education programs, leadership programs, and putting information in people's hands in a digestible way.
Thank you. Johnny?
We're born the same, we bleed the same, and we will leave the same. What we do in between right now, just everything that we've said in this time at the round table, if we don't take this out on the streets and make it infectious and spread it, then we're just waiting around until the next round table. For me, for Johnny Wilson, I'm fortunate. I've been doing it my whole life, and I'm going to continue to challenge everyone to do it if their lives are attached to mine. And so that is who I am. That is what we have to be. And that's what all it has to be, what it's gonna be. And so I challenge all of us when we leave here today to continue to spread and make these uncomfortable conversations with everyone in our lives, and then some, and then educate everyone.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Judge Siler-Mack, the closing word.
And I think that we need to be uncomfortable by getting out of our comfort zones, just hanging with folks that I'm comfortable with associating. Mm-hmm. And like Wade brought out, go where you're the only one. He's done it, I've done it. Mm-hmm. But that's because we have a heart for people and a heart and a passion to help others. I don't care what you look like. If I can help you, I'm going to help you because you're just a human being. And so I challenge all of my students, and what you can do in your class that you're talking about when they won't talk. One of the things that I tell all of my students when they first get here, everybody in this class starts with an A. You either stay there or you go down. But I'm going to tell you how I can guarantee that you will not get an A in this class. I don't care if you get a 100 on every single one of my exams and you have an A average. If you do not participate in this class participation, say something, because your voice is your vote. You have just as much right to be here as I do. I need to know that you're vested in here, because if you're vested, then I'm going to continue to invest. And one of the things I would say is a friend of mine, and I've started using that with my son when they do fundraisers, and people always say, "Oh, can you buy this? Can you do?" I don't do that. So what they had him do is say, "This is what I'm doing. My group is trying to raise, I'm trying to get into this group. And so what I want to know is if you would be willing to invest in me." Mm-hmm. So how do you tell someone you're not willing to invest in them? And how can I invest in you? Well, if you can give me $10, $20, or whatever it is, was their fundraiser. But he didn't say, "Will you buy this my school?" He asked, "Will you invest in me? I want to know when you invest in me." And so if you can look at someone when you said to ask for the help, sometimes words, I'm a vernacular for words, and Judge King says all the time, I put vocabulary gymnastics. So I listen to words. So help sometimes seems like it's so negative and it's like I'm begging. But if I ask you, "Listen, Wade, would you be willing to invest in me?" Well, what do you mean by investing in you? What do I need to do? It sounds different. And then you've pulled him in. So you've made that connection. And so when Wade goes and he's with Sonny and you are out, this is Tony, this is a young man that I'm investing in. He does so how are you investing in? Oh, I've seen some of his work and you're investing in. So automatically they're going to think money invest, but what you're investing is your gifts, talents, and abilities to help him get to the next level. So that's what we need to use our verbiage. So that's what I will challenge all of us to invest in others and bring more to the table than your appetite.
Come on now. There have been so many jewels. I hope everybody's watching this closely. There have been jewels from every generation, every part of this table. Judge Cheri Siler-Mack, Johnny Wilson, Tony Veritas, Wade Fowler.
And I just have to say, though, it's okay to just bring your appetite to the table at my restaurant.
I know, and the food is good. And the food is good. I will say that.
Get
and
a
the
good
food
bite
is
of
good.
the best barbecue in town. I just want to say thank you all for inaugurating this The Talk Roundtable. Thanks for this conversation, for your stories. Much more to come. And remember, whatever you do and all you're doing, make sure that you meet people where they are, not where you want them to be. Love them for whom they are, not who you want them to be. Then maybe we can lead them to where they need to go. And remember, all of this comes down to the fact that we are better together. Come back to the Roundtable. We'll see you next time. God bless.